The first thing I saw at our 6th anniversary dinner was not my husband waiting for me. It was Molly Raines standing beside him with both hands wrapped around the ivory gift box I had packed for Whitney Frost. Her name was still on the little card, tucked under the ribbon, but Trevor had turned it face down, like that could make the truth less visible. Then he smiled near the tea table and said, "Molly made tonight possible," while Whitney stood behind him with tape on her wrist. For a second, nobody moved. The room held still around the soft clink of teacups, the kind of sound I had imagined would make the night feel sweet instead of humiliating. Donna Frost had just set down the last tray of lemon cakes, and I watched her eyes move from Molly's hands to her daughter's face. Whitney did not cry, did not interrupt, did not rescue me from the silence. She only looked at me and murmured, "Iris, did you know he was giving her that?" I wanted to say yes because no sounded too ugly for a room full of people who had spent all day making my marriage look cared for. I wanted to laugh it off, step forward, and take the box back like it had been a simple mistake. But Trevor's hand was already resting behind Molly's chair, not touching her enough to be accused, close enough to be understood. Molly gave me a careful smile and said, "I hope this is okay," while the card with Whitney's name stayed hidden beneath her thumb. That was when I noticed the chair. It had not been squeezed in at the end, like a late guest seat, or left near the wall like someone helping with setup. It was beside Trevor, pulled close enough that his jacket brushed the back of it, while my place card sat near the sugar bowls. I set my glass down before my hand could shake, because if I broke first, Trevor would call me dramatic. So I smiled at Molly, then at Whitney, and understood something cold and simple. I had walked into my own anniversary dinner, and my husband had already seated another woman where I belonged. Before that night became something people whispered about. It was supposed to be small enough to fit in our backyard. I wanted mismatched teacups, grocery store flowers, a few trays of sandwiches, and Trevor sitting beside me long enough for everyone to believe we were still choosing each other. He kept saying the showroom was stretched thin, that regional clients were flying in, that I knew how important this season was for us. So when Whitney Frost asked how many chairs we needed, I told her, "Nothing fancy. Whit. I just want him there." Whitney heard the part I did not say and started building around it. She worked part-time, coordinating events at a lakefront hotel, so loose plans made her nervous in a way they never made me nervous until too late. She sent me checklists between my shifts at the bookstore, then called her mother, Donna. When I forgot to confirm the dessert count, Donna offered lemon cakes from the bakery. Whitney's brother found a sound system, and every time I tried to shrink the night back down, Whitney would breathe through it and answer, "I know you, Iris. You'll wish you had done it right." Trevor let that happen because it made him look like a husband who had planned something beautiful without requiring him to stand inside any of the work. He missed the tasting because a client dinner ran late, skipped the seating call because his district manager needed numbers, and answered my irritated texts with the same smooth line about how he was doing all of this for our future. I believed him because believing him was easier than admitting I had begun measuring my marriage by cancellations. When I told Whitney he was just under pressure, she did not argue. But her next checklist had fewer questions for him and more spaces filled in by her. Then Trevor surprised me by suggesting we move the dinner from our yard to the restaurant by the lake. He said a nicer room would make the night easier, especially if a few work people stopped by for a quick hello. I remember feeling grateful, almost foolishly grateful, because it sounded like he had finally stepped forward. I did not understand then that he had not stepped into our anniversary at all. He had simply found a prettier room for other people's kindness to cover what he was already hiding. Molly Raines did not enter my life like a woman trying to break something. She came in carrying linen samples, a roll of place cards, and the easy confidence of someone who had already been told she belonged. Trevor introduced her at the restaurant as the showroom's best eye for presentation, then added, She's saving us from looking like we planned this in a panic. And I laughed because it sounded like a harmless joke if I did not stand too close to it. Molly smiled at me like she wanted me to like her, not like she wanted to win. That was the part that made everything harder to name. She was polished but not cruel, careful but not nervous. And when she complimented the teacups Whitney had collected, she touched one with the kind of gentleness that made me almost believe she was only helping. Then she turned to Trevor and said, "Trev, the darker napkins would look better with the lake behind you," and caught herself half a breath too late. Trevor moved before I could, softening the moment with a hand on the table and a quick, "She means the head table," like the nickname had not just landed between us. I looked at Molly again, and the pieces did not fit until they fit too well. She knew Trevor hated Earl Grey, knew he had been out of Madison the week before, knew I got overwhelmed in crowded rooms, though I had never told her that. When I reached for the seating list, her fingers were already on the corner of it, and she asked Whitney if one more chair could be added near Trevor because it would make the flow easier. Whitney's eyes came to mine first, waiting for me to say no. But Trevor was already calling me over to greet one of his work people, already turning my hesitation into something no one else had to hear. I told myself not to be petty over a chair. I told myself Molly was probably just the kind of woman who remembered details because presentation was her job. But she did not stand near the dessert table like a helper, and she did not sit at the end like someone passing through. Trevor pulled her into the center before I understood that he had promised her a place, and I was the last person in the room still calling it help. The ride home should have felt like the quiet after a long, overworked night, but Whitney's car carried a silence that did not belong to exhaustion. She kept both hands on the wheel. Donna sat in the back with one arm around a bakery box, and I held the returned gift, like something still warm from being mishandled. Molly had pushed it back into my hands before we left, her smile thin as paper, whispering that she was not sure she should take it after all. I wanted to tell Whitney I was sorry right there, but sorry felt too small beside the tape still stuck to her sleeve and the empty trays her mother had carried out alone. When I finally managed, "Whit, are you okay?" She did not look at me, and that hurt worse than if she had snapped. Donna's eyes lifted in the rearview mirror before Whitney answered, "I'm tired, Iris." But there was no softness in it, only a door closing slowly. I started thanking them for the sound system, the cakes, the tables, all the things I should have named before anyone touched a trash bag. Donna's voice came from the back, even and careful. "Some things don't get lighter just because the night is over." I thought she meant the work. I thought she meant I had let her family give too much while I kept promising I would make it right later. Then Whitney pulled up outside my house and kept the engine running, and the glow from her phone lit the cup holder between us. I saw Trevor's name at the top of an old message thread, and beneath it the words he had sent her before dinner, "Move Molly next to me. Iris already knows." For a few seconds, I could not make that sentence belong to my life. Whitney saw me reading and closed the phone, not fast enough to hide it, not cruel enough to pretend it was nothing. "If you really didn't know," she breathed, "then this is worse than I thought." Before I could answer, Trevor's forgotten jacket shifted on my lap, his phone flashing once from the pocket with Molly's name and a message bright enough to read, "Sitting beside your wife was harder than you promised." I waited 3 days before I went to Donna Frost's bakery because I did not want my apology to look like panic. I brought the ivory gift box, the card with Whitney's name facing up, and a letter I had rewritten until every sentence stopped protecting me. Donna stood behind the counter with flour on her sleeves, looked at the box before my face, and said, "If this is about money, Iris, you're late to the wrong problem." I told her she was right, that I had let her family carry too much of my night while I kept promising later, like later could fold lineages or sweep sugar from the floor. Donna did not forgive me, but she did not send me out either. She opened a folder beside the register and slid the bakery order across the counter, followed by delivery notes and a handwritten list of who had picked up what after dinner. "We were not upset," Because you needed help, she said, her finger near Molly's name. We were upset because your husband made our help look like hers. The words hit before I understood the paper. One tray of lemon cakes had been moved after dinner to a private room under Trevor's reservation, and Molly Raines was listed as the person who called the change in. What private room? I asked, and Donna's face shifted like my confusion had answered something for her. Whitney stepped out from behind the kitchen door. I turned toward her, and the space between us felt bigger than the bakery. Whitney lifted the phone and showed me Trevor's message asking her to move Molly beside him because Iris already agreed. And her voice broke around. I thought you were trying to be graceful. I did not reach for her comfort, because she had been used, too, and my apology could not undo that in one sentence. I only said, I didn't know, while Donna pushed the note closer, and the gift box sat between us like proof that Trevor had moved everything while I was still trying to be grateful. The next morning, I went back to the lakefront restaurant with the bakery note folded inside my purse and Whitney's screenshot saved where I could reach it without shaking. I did not ask Noelle Price for gossip, security footage, or anything that belonged to someone else's privacy. I told her I was listed on the anniversary reservation with Trevor, that our shared card had paid the deposit, and that I needed copies of the records connected to my own event. Noelle studied my face the way service people do when they already know the night went wrong, then said, I can give you what your name is attached to. That sentence was the first steady thing anyone had handed me. She printed the reservation summary, the payment receipt, and the email chain where Trevor had moved our dinner from the smaller room to the lake room because he wanted space for a vendor meeting after guests left. Molly Raines was listed as the secondary contact for the display setup. Not Whitney. Not me. And not anyone from the Frost family. The note beside the private room was short enough to hurt cleanly. Lemon cakes to follow after anniversary service. I stared at the words until they stopped looking like a mistake. Trevor had called that night work, then used his work email to open a second room behind my marriage while I stood thanking people for teacups. Noelle kept her voice professional, almost gentle, and said, I cannot speak to personal relationships, Iris, but I can confirm who requested service changes on your event. I nodded because I understood the difference now. I did not need her to tell me what Trevor had done in that room, only that the room existed. Before I left, Noelle added a note to the file that no future changes could be made under my event name without confirmation from both listed clients. It was not dramatic, but it mattered. Because Trevor had built his lie through small permissions nobody thought to question. I walked out with copies in a plain folder, the kind used for menus and receipts, and it felt heavier than any confession. In the parking lot, I texted Trevor one sentence. Tonight we talk. And you do not get to call her work. Trevor came home after my text with the relaxed face of a man who thought timing could protect him. He saw the folder on the kitchen table, the gift box beside it, and Whitney's screenshot printed on top. Iris, whatever you think this is, you're making it bigger than it needs to be, he said, dropping his keys near the sink. I stayed seated because standing would have given him a reaction to manage. I slid the restaurant receipt toward him and watched his eyes catch on Molly's name. He barely looked at the private room note before moving into the version where everyone else was difficult and he was only tired. Molly helped because Whitney was overwhelmed. Donna misunderstood. Noelle is covering herself, he said, and the words sounded rehearsed. I asked why Molly needed to sit beside him if she was only helping, and he answered too fast. Because it looked better. So I placed Whitney's message in front of him. Move Molly next to me. Iris already knows. Trevor's mouth tightened. Not with guilt yet. Only irritation that the lie had been saved. I was trying to keep the night calm, he said. And I asked why calm required my best friend to believe I had agreed to give another woman my seat. That was when he called Molly. He put her on speaker to prove I was twisting everything, his voice changing into the showroom tone he used with clients. "Tell Iris, this was just work," he said, but Molly's breathing shook before she answered. "Trevor, you told me she knew the marriage was ending. You told me that dinner was for appearances." The kitchen went quiet enough for the refrigerator hum to sound loud. Trevor reached for the phone, but Molly kept going, saying she would not be called work after he had promised her a real place in his life. I looked at him, at the folder, at the screenshot, at the room receipt, and understood his escape route depended on women not comparing notes. I did not ask if he loved her. I told him to leave, and every conversation after that would be in writing. Trevor did not lose his whole life in one dramatic night, and that was what made the fallout feel real. His showroom learned enough to pull him from client dinners because the restaurant records showed he had used a work email and a vendor meeting label for a private room after our anniversary. The referral circle that had once smiled at him through polished countertops went quiet, especially after Donna stopped sending bakery clients his way. Noelle never gossiped, but she did stop taking changes from him under my name. And that small boundary cut cleaner than any public scene. Molly paid for believing him, too. Her manager moved her off customer-facing display events after her name appeared on the service changes, and she stopped answering Trevor when she realized he had promised her a real place, with words he had also used to manage me. She never apologized to me in a way that fixed anything, but she did send one message that said, "He told me you knew." And for once, I believed the pain in another woman's sentence without carrying it for her. Whitney did not become my best friend again because stories like this do not heal on command. We met once at a coffee shop near the square, and I said exactly what I should have said earlier. Your family carried a night that I should have protected. She nodded, tired but not cold, and told me maybe one day we could talk without that dinner sitting between us. Donna was paid back, thanked by name, and never asked to pretend respect had been there all along. I moved into a smaller apartment near the bookstore and kept 2 of the old teacups on my counter. Some evenings, I make tea and hear nothing but my own quiet. Thank you for staying with this story to the end. Sometimes peace is not loud. Sometimes it is a locked door, a warm cup, and finally knowing you do not have to beg anyone to choose you.